Well, this is crazy. Here's a guy showing hacks of how to live for free, like legitimately live for free, illegitimately, illegally. I haven't watched this yet, but you told me about this. Let's watch it and we can react to what's going on here and then try to break down what this guy's pulling off. And of course, it's in Portland. All right, let's see it.
How I got a free house in Portland, Oregon, and how you can too. So the first thing I did was find a vacant house that somebody was trying to rent. Next, I looked up how to break into a lockbox without using force. Thanks, YouTube. Next, I forged some documents. This made it look like I had a lease agreement, and I called the utility companies and had the utilities put in my name. I'm not going to pay them, but they don't know that. When the owner showed up, I politely explained that this was my house now, and they need to leave. So they call the police, and I show them my lease agreement and the utility bills, and they tell the owner that this is a civil matter, and they've got to sue me. This made the owner super angry, so she lawyers up and tries to evict me. Of course, I can't afford a lawyer, so I call up a tenant advocacy group who gives me a lawyer that's 100% free and funded by taxpayers. So my out-of-pocket is still $0. So this lawyer fights on my behalf for months and months, really driving the owner crazy and costing her tens of thousands of dollars. Finally, the owner decided it would be cheaper to just give me a chunk of cash to leave rather than continue paying the lawyer. So she writes me a check for $10K and I move out. I didn't even have to clean the place up, and that's a good thing because I do a lot of drugs and the house looks every bit of it. Still no thank you note for aerating the walls, but whatever. So I just got 9 months of free rent in a house that otherwise would have cost me $3,000 a month, plus a nice cash for keys check. And I wasn't even charged with anything. I always thought that stealing was wrong, but it turns out if you steal a house, it's not even against the law here. So this couldn't have worked out any better. Thanks, Portland.
So what do you think, Kevin? How possible is this to do?
Well, after his video, which I hope is satire, that would be against the law because you're blatantly outlying your crime. Forging of documents, we could start there. But as far as this actually happening, yeah, it totally can happen. In fact, that's one of the downsides of having vacant real estate. It's the worst thing in the world. We call it like an alligator. You can't get any money from it. And the building's decaying. You don't know if there are water leaks. You could risk having this occur to you. It's bad. But what he's done is correct. You don't actually even need a written lease agreement. That helps for creating utilities. You could pull that off of a verbal lease agreement. And you could pull that off as quickly as just moving some clothing into a property. Say, I live here now. You don't even need a lease. It's just, oh, officer, see, I have all my things in the closet here. I'm a tenant. I had a verbal agreement that I'm supposed to be a caretaker and I'm here to stay. That is true. Those opportunities do exist, and there are tenant advocacy groups, as we saw here, that do exactly what the person describes. And that's unfortunately one of the risks of real estate. So when you're owning real estate, you're betting that 99.9% of people aren't scumbags like what was just described there. But yes, those are real risks.
So how do you like insulate yourself from that happening? What do you do?
Yeah, well, generally, I like to buy in areas where you're not so subject to lunacy like that occurring. Portland, Oregon, I think it was almost part of his satire of purposefully choosing Portland, Oregon here. But area helps. Neighborhoods where neighbors are really aware of what's going on and they report suspicious activity. You got to catch this stuff early. You've got to be aware of what's going on. If you've got vacant real estate that might be subject to this, you've probably got to throw up like an Arlo solar camera or like a Ring solar camera and be aware of what's going on at your property. So as soon as you see it, you could call on it right away. That would probably be your best defense to this, is being able to show on some kind of video to law enforcement, look, this person says they've been living here for X many days or whatever. Here's the camera that shows they weren't there as of 24 hours ago. So you've got to have some really strong proof that somebody's basically squatting. And I think almost the only way you could do it, other than certainly better security and lighting for your property, is actual cold, hard proof. And a video with solar kind of battery backup or whatever, that would do it. The Arlo ones are interesting. I haven't used them in years, and it's not sponsored by Arlo by any means, but they actually had 4G built into them. So you could pay a little service fee annually. And so that way you could power it with solar and you didn't need to have internet at the home and you could still get footage. So those were really useful for those sort of like deploy while it's vacant and then remove when you're done and patch the hole kind of situation. I really like that. That's probably what I would do. Or the next best thing is if you have vacant real estate, get it rented ASAP. That's best case scenario. don't have vacant real estate. Most people have vacant real estate because they're unrealistic on the price. Consider commercial real estate. People get into owning a commercial real estate building and they think, oh, well, it was previously renting for $2. I'll put it up for $2.20 because inflation or whatever. And they don't factor in that most tenants will move into a commercial building with tenant improvements. And so unless you're offering those, you're actually way overpriced on rent. That previous $2 was considering all of the improvements the prior tenant got. So you see commercials sit vacant all the time. You see residential sit vacant because people think their property is worth more than it is. Price is almost always the driver. Unless there's something materially wrong with the property, it's almost always price. So just rent your stuff out. Don't have vacant real estate.
Some of the comments we have, this is on the Twitter response here. One guy said, dude would have just disappeared if he did this in Texas.
Yeah, then that's also not true. So people think that Texas is super landlord friendly. And we were just in an inspection on a property where the landlord, this was like 141 units, the landlord had 6 evictions going, and at least 3 of them got kicked out in the courts after like 2 or 3 months of waiting, and they have to start over. So really this idea that Texas is like this lawless cowboy area, and you're still going to get killed for murder or arrested for murder if you go disappear someone. So, I mean, it's an internet comment, so it's not realistic. But this idea that Texas is so landlord friendly is not as true as people think once you actually get into the law.
We got a couple more comments like they still have police in Portland. And then one of them, it's hard to read in this country.
Oh, it took me a moment.
It's hard to read that in this country, a homeowner has to pay a squatter to leave. I've heard this happening in other states, and it's sad. At what point does this go from a civil case to a criminal case?
Well, I mean, if somebody breaks and enters, right? So the person was able to get in by breaking that lockbox. So that was really clever because it's hard to prove that they broke in. Because you would have to like forensically analyze that lock to see some damage maybe to the tumblers, which I don't even know that you will. At that point, it's going to cost you way more than 10 grand to get rid of the dude. So breaking and entering would be a crime, and then squatting thereafter. Then it's a burglary, 2 crimes. As far as, how do you prove that this is a crime beyond that? I mean, admitting to forgery, right? It's not so much that the person didn't commit a crime. These are crimes. Forging and lying about having a contract with somebody when you don't, those are crimes. It's just the burden of proof. How do you prove it?
I learned a lot.